Pricing just seems to be one of these topics that is contentious. I will not name names, but I do know that there are clients talking about a feeling of kind of being dropped in the pricing machine at one end and being spat out the other end.
You reference the science and also the art.
Yep.
Are you biased towards one, or are they both equally as important as each other?
I'm not biased towards it. I love them both.
Where does your first principles thinking start? Is it at the pricing level, or is it at the grassroots of the organization?
Kicking the tires at every step. It means that you get to a great solution that is very robust and pressure tested.
Without giving away your secret sauce, what underpins Monevate's approach to pricing advisory?
I might be able to tell you, like, by the way, look, this is the perfect answer for your business. It's wonderful. It's going to create tons of value. Your customers are going to love it. But
today on Return on Insight, we have James Wilton from Monevate. James, thank you very much for joining us.
thank you for having me.
James, just a quick high-level overview of yourself, but also as well Monevate, your company.
Yeah, so Monevate is a pricing strategy focused consulting firm. We work with we look at companies across sectors, but we particularly work with tech and SaaS and increasingly AI companies to be able to refine their pricing strategies and just better monetize their products, capture more of the value that they create.
Without giving away your secret sauce, what underpins Monevate's approach to pricing advisory?
I think the most important thing about our approach is that we are very bespoke. We don't believe in templatization or the idea that there is a right or a wrong way to price for any particular market. You know, the right way to price is always going to be a combination of your objectives. So what are you trying to achieve? Your product, you know, what is your product? What features do you have? What capabilities? How does it create value? And then your market as well. So your customers, what do they want? What do they need? What are their buying preferences? What do they expect? All of those factors have to combine together to produce the right pricing strategy for you. And being able to do that requires a lot of learning along the way. You have to get all of those, and then you have to end up actually injecting the art side of pricing as well. Be able to think out of the box a little bit and get to a solution that's going to incorporate all of those elements.
So you reference the science and also the art.
Yep.
Are you biased towards one, or are they both equally as important as each other?
I'm not biased towards it. I love them both. No, I think they are both incredibly important as part of the solution. You do need the science. You know, you need data, you need insights, you need to be able to get that bedrock to be able to base it. But if you were to just get the science side and get all those points, it will tell you probably what answers you can't do, but it won't tell you what is the optimum solution. You have to bring that art component in to be able to find the unique best solution that you possibly can. Equally though, I mean, if you didn't have the science and you just went with the art, you'd have a load of creative ideas that may or may not work. You wouldn't have any basis for it. So you really do need the two of them together.
The art component being somewhat intangible, I guess, does this take into consideration brand, passion, things like that?
Yeah, it does. It incorporates brand. It also, there's a bit of just thinking about how do you want to position yourself, right? What is this particular way of laying out the product? What does it signify? What is the philosophy behind it? You know, when you start laying things out in certain ways, you can make customers feel certain things or believe certain things about the product or the way that it creates value. So it's very difficult to do all that stuff in a purely data-based way. You have to just really, you know, inject feelings and emotions, and I think that's a big part of where the art comes in.
Pricing is very high stakes, and consulting is trust-based. How do these marry up in the Monovate solution?
It definitely is the case, right? And I think if you are not able to recommend solutions that that do a good job and that ultimately result in value being captured, you know, you're not going to have a consulting firm that does that for too much longer, right? So it really does mean that I think implementation is very important. So you have to be able to do implementation work, which ensures that your solution gets implemented. But I think even before that implementation comes in, you have to be able to build a solution that is implementable as well. We have a concept at Monevate that we call the BPA, which is the best pragmatic answer, which basically means the best answer that you can possibly get to subject to your constraints. So I might be able to tell you, like, by the way, look, this is the perfect answer for your business. It's wonderful. It's going to create tons of value. Your customers are going to love it, but it might take you 15 months to implement based on where you are. And you might tell me, I need something that I can do in 3 months. So that would not be a good answer for you. But I would say what I have seen in consulting is that those kind of answers get recommended all the time, right? And then that's when you end up getting shelfware because, it's an idea that theoretically works, but isn't actually going to go anywhere. When you focus on the BPA, as we talked about, you're basically agreeing that we are going to give you something which you are going to commit to actually do, which makes it far more likely they're actually going to be able to implement it, which means they're far more likely going to be able to get value out of the project.
This implementation piece or feasibility,
Yeah.
I guess, is based on capability, right, of your clients.
Yes.
How do you assess the capability of your clients to be able to suggest implementable or BPAs?
You learn things through the engagement, and you might figure out that maybe they are more or less well set up to be able to do these things. But my view has always been, if the client does not want you to help execute the solution, they feel they have it, you basically have to let them get on with it and just be available to help if it turns out that they actually do need it. So, I mean, the way we usually do this is we're very clear when we take on a pricing strategy project, we can help with this. We can do X, Y, and Z, which will help you operationalize the solution. We can put project managers on the ground who are going to help to do that. But none of this is required. It's just about if you decide that you need that. And obviously, a lot of the time you end up with a solution when the client doesn't believe that they need help, and then they try to do it, and it turns out to either be more difficult than they were expecting or just more resource intensive, and then they might decide that they actually need the help after all. So I think just being flexible to those needs as they evolve is important.
And so, Motivate, you define strategy. Do you also augment pricing strategy as well? So, working alongside pre existing strategies that are in play?
Well, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I would say, well, I think a couple of different situations where that might come in. I mean, if you're working with a larger company that has lots of different product lines, and they want to, say, bring out another product and monetize that, then they might want to build a pricing strategy that works for this new product, but also works alongside the other ones that are there. So you have to be able to make that work in unison. And honestly, it takes away the degrees of freedom, right? Because there are extra constraints then point on this new pricing strategy that you have. So it kind of makes the answer easier to get to. It might make the answer less optimum because you're locking in some of the things that you can do. So I think that's one situation where it happens. Another situation where that happens is, oftentimes this is probably something with earlier stage companies you might work with. Oftentimes they've put thought into what their pricing strategy should be anyway, and they've built it out and sketched it out, and they feel like it's probably a good starting place, but they're not absolutely sure. So they'll want you to come in and be able to validate it, right? And rather than just completely rip it up and start again from scratch, it's like saying, let's assume this is reasonably close. Let's just kick the tires and check. So if it doesn't work, tell me. But if it mostly works, just tell me what I should tweak about it rather than, developing something from the ground up.
Pricing is something that touches almost every corner of an organization.
Yep.
So, it means that you have a wide array of stakeholders that you need to manage relations with.
Yes.
What's the approach to that?
It means when you're practically running an engagement, when you're changing pricing strategy, I think there's a there's a wide variety of stakeholders that have to be involved, right? I have seen projects where you try to make it this very small decision-making team, and then you just kind of explain it to the organization afterwards. It just, it doesn't work. You have to bring them along on the journey. So anybody who is going to have an important, potentially important information that will shape the pricing strategy needs to be included. And anybody who has a stake in the outcome, I would argue, needs to be included as well. And in terms of the decision-making team, that usually means the CEO, the chief financial officer, the strategy officer, if there is one, marketing, sales. You have to have all those different functions represented. So you need to bring them along within that project. The way that we run that, that usually means having over the course of say a 8 to 12 week project, you're probably having somewhere between 6 to 7 different steering committee meetings to kind of keep moving the answer along. So then that's one side of it. The other side of it is, even though those people are involved, you cannot have a situation where you have to have consensus to move forward, because you will never get it in that kind of a group. You're going to have lots of different people who have lots of very strong opinions, and pricing just seems to be one of these topics that is contentious. Nobody always has exactly the same idea about where it should go. So if you're waiting for everybody to agree, you're going to be waiting forever. Projects get delayed, and obviously that doesn't work. So you need a situation where you have forums for everybody to be able to voice their opinion and say what's right, what's wrong, what they think should happen. But then you usually need like one or two central decision makers who are going to say, if we do not have agreement at this point, I'm going to decide what this should be. And then everybody has to decide to disagree and commit to the next phase. And then you keep it moving forward.
You're in a space which perhaps overlaps with some very established strategy institutions. How do you differentiate from them?
It's a great question. Yeah, and I mean, I've come from a couple. I mean, I used to work for McKinsey immediately before forming Monevate, and then of course, there are a couple of quite established pricing consulting firms who we compete with quite frequently. I think there are two groups that we would need to differentiate from, right? And I think one of the groups is the other boutique pricing strategy consulting firms. There are quite a lot of those out there, typically serving smaller companies. And then there are the larger firms like McKinsey and so forth, who obviously everybody knows, and they do great work. I think the way that we differentiate from the smaller boutiques is really in terms of the rigor of the problem solving process. I think the thing that I really took from McKinsey more than anything else was the value in being incredibly thorough in problem solving, starting from first principles, kicking the tires at every step, challenging. In doing that, it means that you really get to a great solution that is very unique to the client that you're working with, and works across all these different angles, and is very robust and pressure tested by the time you get to the end. I will not name names, but I do know that there are some boutique firms who maybe haven't gone through the process of picking up those skills as they have evolved. So you hear clients talking about a feeling of kind of being dropped in the pricing machine at one end and being spat out the other end without having that kind of that thought between. So maybe that results in a good answer, but it may not do, right? There's more risk in that process. So I think that's the big point of differentiation from the boutiques. I think the big differentiation from the bigger firms like McKinsey is specialization at one side, and then flexibility and collaboration on the other side. I think in terms of specialization, when I was at McKinsey, I led the pricing service line for Fuel, which is the part of McKinsey that focuses on fast growth tech. So I was doing a lot of McKinsey level work in this particular area, and I liked it. Right, we did really good work, and we worked with great people, all of that. But I was training engagement managers and associates on pricing strategy all the time, right? Because they are a generalist firm. You don't have a pool of associates and engagement managers who've done countless of pricing projects. So you work with one team, you train them on pricing. By the middle of the project, they know pretty well what they're doing, but at the beginning they are working it all out, and then they roll off, and then you do your next project, and you end up with another team who haven't done any pricing strategy in this space. So it's tough, and it means for the client, right, that you're very dependent on the leadership for thought leadership, because the ground team doesn't have it, right? They're really just executing that vision. With us, right, all of the engagement managers and associates that we have work on pricing strategy projects all the time, and pricing strategy projects for B2B SaaS and tech and AI the vast majority of the time within that. So there's a huge amount of knowledge and specialization within that. That means that you ultimately get to better answers, right? Because if we're talking about, we're including that more generalist problem-solving approach, and you're marrying that with highly specialized knowledge, you get to really great answers in a pretty good amount of time. I think the other side of that we were talking about is the flexibility and collaboration. Most consulting firms make recommendations, as I talked about. They say, we think you should do this, so it's up to you now whether you do it. We don't do it that way. What we think is the final output of our project is a decision on what they should do. So what that means is, as we're going through this process, we might at some point in the middle say, Mr. Client, this is what we think that you should do, and they'll tell us, for whatever reason, we can't do that. We don't want to do that. We appreciate why you believe that we should do this, Monevate, but we want to do this. We'll make it very clear why we think they should do what we originally thought of, and we'll point out all the trade-offs and the flaws in taking the other path. But as long as they've heard us and it's all documented, and they tell us we want to do this, then at that point we will pivot and we will start building out the pricing strategy that they want to do. Now, there's a pitfall to us in the sense that we may end up building out a pricing strategy that doesn't work as well because we think it might, but it does mean that the client ends up with a pricing strategy that they're definitely going to put into place. And most of the time, while that strategy may not have worked as well as what we recommended would, it's probably going to work better than what we had originally. So you're kind of there, at least then they've got a pathway to get to something which is better than what they are currently working with, and they're going to get value out of the project one way or the other.
Pricing is something that is the culmination of the value delivered.
Yep.
And you mentioned first principles thinking. Where does your first principles thinking start? Is it at the pricing level, or is it at the grassroots of the organization?
It starts with the high level objectives of the company. Really, the first thing you have to get complete alignment on when you're building a pricing strategy is, what are you guys trying to achieve through this pricing? And that sounds very obvious and trivial, but I can tell you there's more misalignment across executive teams in this area than you would think. And it makes sense, right? Because you think it's not usually the case that a company is laser focused on saying we just want to increase revenue. They're usually thinking, well, we want to increase revenue, but we also want to make sure our margins are higher than this, and we don't want to lose any customers. And there's all this kind of bunch of things that they are trying to solve for. And I can tell you that a pricing strategy that is really good at boosting revenue is going to look very different from a pricing strategy that is very good at maximizing margin, and is going to look very different from a pricing strategy that is, fully set to maximize the volume and make sure that you keep all of your customers. So if you're trying to solve for all of those things together, it's very difficult to build a pricing strategy because everything's going to pull in completely the opposite direction. So what you need to be able to do is to be able to prioritize and say, this is the most important thing for us, this is second, and this is third. And so then when you're looking at the different components of your pricing strategy, like, are you going to go good, better, best packaging, or are you going to go for a modular approach or an a la carte approach, you can think about how those different decisions are going to pull towards those different objectives, and you can make those choices and make sure that all of those things are kind of taken into account appropriately to give you something that delivers balance across all of those different things.
James, that really conveys the complexity involved in pricing strategy. Before we end, we typically will play a game called This or That.
Okay.
I'm going to read out a couple of opposites, and you have to pick one of them without any explanation.
Okay.
So starting off first with debt or equity.
Equity.
Work from home or back to office.
Work from home.
Private markets or public markets.
Private markets.
Growth or operational efficiency.
Growth.
Profit or purpose.
Purpose.
Startup hustle or corporate grind.
Oh, a tough one. Corporate grind, but it's close.
Data or gut.
Data.
Strategy or execution.
Strategy.
Finally, reduce cost or drive revenue.
Drive revenue.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
For me too. Thank you.